Same thing with Creed, who you arguably make the argument that he's one of the top centers in the league already heading into year 2.
You are listening to KC Sports Network, the #1 podcast network for today's Kansas City sports fans. With former players from your favorite teams, informed perspectives, and former insiders, this is the place for you. KC Sports Network is proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
What is up, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome back to One-on-One, a KC Sports Network podcast. I am your co-host, Mike DeVito, here as always with Chiefs legend and 9-year NFL veteran, Super Bowl champion, all those things, Jeff Allen. Big Jeff, what's up, baby? How you doing?
What's going on, Mike, man? I'm happy to be here. We got our boy Duke Manyweather in the house.
Man, we got Duke in the house. We're going to jump right into it. We want to make sure we take our guest time and get as much out of it as we can. But before, real quick, Cookie Society coming up on September. Got the new lineup coming out soon. Big Jeff, anything I need to remember there?
We're still in August, man, so it's the same cookies from the previous week. We do have Pop-Tart, strawberry Pop-Tart this week, so check that out.
Get on it. Get the merch. Get all that. CookieSociety.com. They shop nationwide, ship nationwide, so go ahead and check them out. CookieSociety.com. Duke, what's up, brother?
Not much at all, man. Jeff, I should have came over to your spot. We're right down the road.
Yeah, I know, man.
We could have met up at one of the stores and did this.
Oh, that's cool. You guys are close?
Yeah, man. Duke's right down the road from me, man.
Yeah, we're probably 6 minutes away from each other right now.
He's the reason I moved up here. He doesn't even know it.
Dang, man. So, Duke, I know I imagine the vast majority of our audience is going to know who you are, but maybe real quickly just sort of introduce yourself, what you do, and what you're great at.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am definitely the founder and creator of O-Line Masterminds, along with Lane Johnson. But O-Line Masterminds really is a holistic and ground-up approach to offensive line development in which we train the mind, the body, and the craft. And we take that serious. We take our development in terms of developing the actual person serious. Much like as Jeff is a shining reflection of that, being able to transition out of football, having those type of conversations about what's next. And it's a brotherhood. It's a brotherhood. We started off with a small core group, which Jeff was a part of that group. And now annually we have around 40 to 45 guys that we train, even more that we consult with, including teams. And then there's about over 200 that come to our summit annually. We've got a really strong Chiefs relationship, really great relationship with Andy Heck down at training camp for a couple of years, and have done stuff with the Chiefs. Have done media with the Chiefs and some consulting and stuff like that. So definitely very familiar with the Chiefs. And then, of course, guys like Mitch Schwartz and Jeff Allen, and now the next wave of guys like Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith and Darian Kennard have all trained with me in my program. So very strong Chiefs connection, and top-notch organization. I think what Coach Reed has done there, and then Coach Heck on the offensive line, and then Veach. It's just been nothing short of incredible. And, it's a team that I always make sure that I turn on the film very quickly to catch up with and see what the guys are doing.
And Duke, we're gonna get into that stuff with the Chiefs. But before we do that, like, hats off to you. What you've created and what you've done is absolutely incredible. And I know, having been out of the league for 6 years, I mean, the word still got up to me about everything that you're doing, teaching guys and training guys. And not only have I competed against those guys and seen the difference that you make, but you can watch it day in and day out on you mentioned the guys with the Chiefs. I mean, there's guys like that all over the league that you've worked with, and you can see the difference in the caliber of player. And I know as a defensive lineman, man, I would have died to have someone like you to go to during the offseason, to go to prior to pro days and combines and all this stuff, to really learn how to play the game. And so what you've been doing is just incredible. And let me give you a story. So you said you worked with Mitchell Schwartz, and my last year in Kansas City, I played with Mitchell, and I imagine, I know he's one of your guys. And obviously Mitchell's Mitchell's really good, and everybody knows that. But I didn't realize how good. And I remember we were playing against him. He was with the Browns. I was with the Chiefs, and I had come in for a play, and the Browns were running an outside zone, and I was a wide 5. Now I never ever get reached as a wide. I mean, I made my livelihood not getting reached as a wide 5. And I came in there and I was wide, lined up perfect. And man, this man Schwartz, I don't know what kind of technique you're teaching these guys, but it was this beautiful, like he just got outside of me, got to my shoulder, pinned me inside, back runs around for a touchdown on an outside zone. I was like, what the hell just happened? Like, how did that? But like, that's, I mean, so again, just hats off to you, Duke.
I appreciate it, but I can't take credit for that, man. That's Mitch. I did work with Mitch very early in his career, his first couple of years. But as Mitch started to develop his own thing, he kind of did his own thing in terms of training, but very much involved in the day-to-day conversations and also the structure within O-line Masterminds. Mitch was a big part of that as well, and continues to be. Which we are very grateful for because his voice, his experience, his perspective in the room has gone a long ways with the young guys. I mean, guys like Rashawn Slater have attached themselves to Mitch. I remember last year they were kind of in the corner for what seemed like an hour, just walking and talking through stuff. But the cool thing about Mitch, and I think he probably picked a lot of this up from Joe Thomas, is just the mental preparation and then being very prolific and a level of mastery of the small things, something as simple as the weight distribution through the up leg or the weight distribution in the stance, and really not so much being comfortable in the stance, but understanding where their stance need to be versus the opponent that they were going to face that week. So those are some of the nuances and details that I think made Mitch really a special player, that made Joe Thomas a really special player. And that stuff is contagious when you add that in to an O-line room, when you add that into a program like us. I mean, so much I've learned from Mitch. When you add that into, younger guys, it becomes contagious because, as we always say, success leaves clues. And when you start to see guys really become hyper-focused in a positive way on something as simple as a stance, that goes a long ways.
Look, man, I almost cut you off when you said you couldn't take credit, because you could take credit for a lot of guys, Duke. And I appreciate you. I appreciate you being humble, but I'm one of those people. And I know I wasn't at the very beginning of your career, but I was at the early stages, and I saw how hard you work, man. And
but you're pretty early though, man.
Yeah, I was definitely pretty early. But to see the work that you put in and the impact that you've had on so many guys, including myself. I can remember going into my final season with the Chiefs before I hit free agency year 4. Just the scouting reports you were giving me, the details that were in there. And I was watching film and I was picking up things then. But there were certain things and nuances that I didn't have as a young guy because I was still early in my career that I was picking up just from those scouting reports. And just to give you a glimpse into just organizations, we have scouts. We have guys that in our game plan books that leave scouting reports and tendencies on these individual guys, but they're not very detailed. And to be honest, they aren't very good. It's like, they got a lot of things going on. But damn, every Monday I would get that scouting report on individuals from Duke, and I knew down to a T what that guy's favorite move was, right versus left, percentages, all these different things, blitzes, all these things. And I'm going into, the week already prepared before we even meet as a team with the staff. And they're like, man, what are you doing? I'm like, man, I got the cheat sheet.
You know what's funny about that? There's a lot of guys around the league that have some very, very funny stories about the scouting reports that I will provide because I know Jeff Schwartz has one, Brian Balaga has a couple of them as well in terms of the stories because they would be very detailed. And really what it boiled down to, guys, is that when you get into a scouting department, when you get into coaching, you can't watch every snap. Guys may tell you they do, but you can't watch every snap. I do. I end up watching every snap. And what I realized is I was able to pick the brain of couple of D linemen, and they said that especially within the division, what they try to do is give different looks every time they play a team. If they know they have to play a team twice, they're gonna give a different look. So what I was doing was, say the Chiefs, they played Denver. I would go back and look at not so much what Denver put on tape the week before or the previous 2 weeks, but what they put on tape 4 weeks ago or 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. Because typically guys are going to get back to a comfort zone at some point and give different looks, but they tend to repeat stuff. And real quick story, Jeff Schwartz will always tell this one too. The Colts, I believe they had played the Colts in the regular season in 2013 and played them again in the playoffs. And he was going against Corey Redding. And I specifically told him, I said, hey, listen, Corey Redding is what he's going to do to you is he's going to go bull, push, pull, and then disengage. And he goes, he's not going to do that. He hasn't shown that on tape the last 3 weeks ago. Yeah, but he did it early on in the season. I said he's going to come back to it. And sure enough, Jeff Schwartz got beat with a push-pull drag, and he texts me, and he goes, son of a bitch, he got me with the push-pull. All I did is I screenshotted the report and highlighted like the key point where it says he's going to come back to the push-pull drag. And it's just stuff like that. But really what it boiled down to was the preparation. Yeah. Watching every snap, understanding like, oh, okay, there's some tendencies here. Oh, wait a minute, this guy has a different move that he goes to when he lines up on the right side versus the left side, or just formations. And based upon, I start to look at the safety alignment, not so much with that would predict in terms of the pressure, but just the overall line movement. So like if you have a safety that's kind of in the deep half, kind of filling an A gap, and then you got a backer kind of filling the A gap as well. If those guys trigger, somebody has to have B gap, so you kind of know that you've got the D line, the D tackle that's probably going to slant to that gap at some point. So it was just figuring stuff out like that weren't necessary pressures, but just figuring out based upon alignment what the tendency is. If you kind of look at the three levels of the defense, what may happen, especially if you're running anything like that outside zone where if you get any type of movement across your face, it can kind of derail that, much to what you were talking about being a wide five. So it was just stuff like that I would kind of pick up and then, just feed it right back to the players like, hey, keep an eye on this. And 9 times out of 10, there would be some fire to that smoke.
Duke, I and Jeff, listen, you cut me off if I'm going too much. I got a million questions, but I'm curious. I'm curious, Duke, about how you got to this point. Like, tell us about your backstory, because we know about, you're on pace to be one of the greatest offensive line coaches ever. What's sort of the story? What led you to this point? How did you get here?
Well, I got into coaching really early, man. I played at Humboldt State University, Division II guy, undersized offensive lineman my entire life. But I understood my controllables. My controllables were how hard I worked in the weight room preparing physically, how hard I worked in the classroom, in the film room preparing mentally, and then the technique aspect. I knew if I control those, whatever would happen, would happen. And every level I played at, whether it was high school, college, they were always trying to replace me. They were always trying to find a way why it wouldn't work. And then I would get in and it would work. So it's just kind of how I have been my entire life, really. But I've always kind of been curious. I've always been curious to why things work. I've been always curious to why coaches think certain ways. I've always been curious to what I can do to kind of maximize myself. And so that curiosity led me to almost be like a student of the game, but then also a coach on the field. And a lot of times where I wasn't the guy, so to speak, in my college career, but ended up carving out a decent college career for the level, for what it was and everything I was up against. Had the opportunity to play arena football. And I'll never forget this. I got released right before the playoffs. I was playing for the Arkansas Twisters at the time. And normally they have like some personnel guy take you to the airport or whatever. My offensive line coach, Jim Beverly, was like, hey, I'm going to take you to the airport. I'm like, all right, this is weird. And he goes, listen, this isn't the first time you've heard this. He goes, but if you're going to continue to play football, you're going to hear this more. He goes, you're fighting genetics. He goes, and I think you've maximized about all you can maximize to be able to get to this level and play and show up. He goes, but you got a natural gift to lead and to coach. He goes, and I specifically wanted to tell you that there's a place for you in football if you continue to pursue this thing. It may not be on the field, he goes, but it could be as a coach. What Jim didn't know is right before I had played the arena football, I had an offer from College of the Redwoods Junior College, which was 30 minutes south from my alma mater in Eureka, California. And they had offered me the run game coordinator, offensive line coaching job. And I had this grand idea. No, I'm playing football. I'm going to play arena football. At the time, I thought I could probably go overseas and play. But when I got to the AFL, I started to see how good I wasn't. But when Coach Beverly told me that, it clicked. And so I'll never forget. I landed, and I immediately called Coach Dave Banducci, God rest his soul, and said, hey, is the job still open? He goes, absolutely. And so I took it and never looked back. Coach, the O-line and run game coordinator there for 3 years. And then actually went to my alma mater, back to Humboldt State, and I was assistant strength and conditioning coach, but then also coached D-line. And I coached D-line for 3 years at Humboldt State, all while maintaining a website that I created called Beyond the Combine. Beyond the Combine was pretty special because what I did was I only scouted offensive linemen and defensive linemen on Beyond the Combine. That was it. And what I would do is I would watch every snap a guy played. At the time, it was YouTube or me like physically videotaping games off of TV. And I would watch every snap they played, and I would talk about their capacity for development in a biomechanics standpoint. Because at the time, I was a history major and biomechanic, kinesiology student. And so I would talk about it in that regard in terms of, hey, this is what it looks like from a movement standpoint. This is some things that he could probably do in his training that would strengthen his technique aspect. And that caught the attention of a guy named Charles Bailey. And Charles, early on was, at the forefront of the offensive line development. So we kind of had a rapport and started a relationship. But Charles brought me on as his director of player personnel and lead performance coach. So the early years of offensive line performance, I was very influential, or I should say, a very important piece of that business building, even though they probably won't tell you that now. I'm dead to them. It's all right. But if you kind of look at a lot of the pieces that were there then versus where they ended up, and you can kind of see the transition. But that's neither here nor there. So my time ran out at O-line Performance. Pretty much when I was booted from there, I kind of did my own thing. And the first step to doing my own thing was to understand what I was really good at, what my controllables were again. And so the first thing I did was started to provide these scouting reports to these guys. So watching the film, all while starting to add to my toolbox with training and more implementation of different things to get these guys physically better. So from there, I was kind of off the radar. That was like the end of 2014. And then I took a consulting gig out here in Dallas. Was out here in Dallas, doing some consulting projects for the Cowboys, completely unrelated to O-line, really. It was just more mentoring and leadership. I was with them for a while, all while still providing the scouting reports and then being able to train Mitch in the offseason and or actually Jeff in the offseason and back in Charlotte, and then Jeff Allen, and then that turned into Ronald Leary, and then that turned into Jeremy Parnell. So Jeff is being modest here, but he was still part of the early group in terms of the guys that I worked with and trained in both locations, really, when I was in Arizona and then when I came here. But that trajectory really put me on to understanding that, hey, listen, man, I don't have to be like everybody else. Like, I don't need to work for a team because I saw the inner, quote unquote, how the sausage is made. There's a quote where the two things you don't want to know how they're made are how laws and bills are passed and made, and then how sausage are made, because it'll disgust you, both of them.
Right.
And not that it was a bad experience, doing consulting with the Cowboys, because it wasn't. I mean, the organization, they really do take care of you in terms of how they treat people. But it's just like, when you're inside of a building or working in that inner structure, you start to see the things for what they are, and you go, okay, where do I want to be different? Where can I really help these guys? And so that's really what it was for me, is that the best thing that probably happened to me was doing that consulting, because it allowed me to say, okay, it solidified me doing my own thing, branching out on my own, and fully going for what I truly had a passion for. That's offensive line development, with the three heads of the scouting, the development, and then also the mental aspect for it. And again, like I said, that first year of O-line Masterminds, we had 27 guys in the room. Jeff Allen was a part of that. And then we grew to about 48. And then the next year, 90. And then like 175. And then this year, we're like well over 225, almost 250 guys in year 5.
Unbelievable, Duke. It's so, I mean, it's just, again, congratulations. That's a fantastic story, and just well done. The perseverance and where you've gotten to. I mean, Jeff and I have talked about it before. Coaching football and playing football are two completely different things, and I think people conflate the two talents, right? People think, well, because you can play football, you must be able to coach. And I did an interview for a Division III job over here, a defensive line coach, and they said, all right, tell us how you're going to teach the guys how to get into a 3-point stance. I was thinking, damn, I haven't thought about getting in a 3-point stance for 15 years. Like I don't know, just get in the stance. I don't, so
it's a process.
Man. So congratulations on that, being able to get to the top of the level, playing it, and then being able to switch gears and coach it and coach at a incredibly high level, which is really well done. Look, we only got 10 minutes left. I have a million questions. We're going to have you come back on for another session if you're okay with that.
We'll go.
But
we'll go as long as I can until my meeting starts.
Okay.
I'm going to add to it, man. You talked about being different, and you kind of alluded to why you're different, but I'm going to tell you why you're different from my perspective, and being around so many different gurus or coaches and people that are around football. You take the holistic approach, and then you talked about the biomechanical aspect of your teaching. I mean, I got a BMW. My coach in college would tell me all the time that stands for body made wrong. I may not look like I can do the job, but I fucking get it done.
It's true, you get it done, brother.
But you're one of the very few people that understood the way my body worked, because I'm fucking knock-kneed, my elbows don't extend all the way. But you have the ability to pinpoint guys' special gifts and how they can use those gifts and maximize them, but also strengthen their weaknesses. And a lot of coaches, they think it's just cookie cutter, and they tell you do this technique or do that technique, and if you just do it this way, it's going to work. And biomechanically, there's certain things that I just couldn't do because I was made different. Right. So I'm so happy I came across you during my career, because that helped me understand my body a little bit more. That made me more efficient, and it made me a better football player. And I was then able to kind of tell the younger guys, like, hey, I may be able to do this, but you can't. Let's figure out what you're good at, and in turn, I call it compound impact. Help somebody else along the way. So I mean, that's great, man.
Yeah. And Big Jeff played against you, brother. I know I can testify to you're an incredible player, and I know Duke played a big role in that. So I can testify, because I had to deal with your ass every freaking day. Practice, driving me off the ball, pushing me in the back. Freaking man. Duke, I want to ask you about how you work with. Well, we'll get into the pro guys in a sec, but I'm curious about the guys coming up into the league, right? The guys coming out, getting ready for the pro day, the combine, things like that. Bill Belichick said a long time ago, I can't remember exactly when, I believe I was still playing, but he kept saying something along the lines of how the combine trading is bullshit, because you got these guys training to be track stars, and they're coming to play in the NFL, so that and I remember training for it. I mean, you really were. You were training for a track meet. You weren't training for playing pro football. It seems like you're developing these guys, these young guys, not only to do well at the pro day and the combine, but also to get ready to play offensive line. Can you talk to me about sort of what that what goes in? What's the secret sauce, man? How are you working with these guys that are getting ready to play in the league?
Yeah, one of the things that I always, and it starts with the language and the intent of our program. I don't call it combine training. I call it our rookie transition program. The reason
good.
being is whether you're a guy that's an early arrival that is right after his last game, that could be late November, or whether they opt out from a bowl game, or whatever it may be. You got 8 to 10 weeks to get this guy mentally, physically, and craft-wise prepared to make that transition. And kind of how I look at it is all these stops along the way, we want to check a box. So from your last game in college until you show up at the NFL, or let's back up. Your last game in college, if you're invited to an all-star game, when I get these guys in the building, we want them to look a little different and a little improved from their last game to when they show up at the Senior Bowl or the East-West Shrine game or the NFLPA. Then from the NFLPA, we want them to look a little different, a little more improved when they show up from that game to the combine. From that point on, we want them to look a little different from when they're at the combine to when they've now approached their pro day. From that point, we want them to look a little different from their pro day to their top 30 visits or private workouts. From that point, when they get into rookie minicamp and so forth, so on, we understand that the draft, the combine, those workouts, that isn't the destination. Those are all just events, and those are all stops along the way. So we want to check those boxes. And so we take the approach where that we can't afford to waste 8 to 10 weeks and looking pretty and going out there, but the tape doesn't match it. Now, if there's some guys that have some questions that need to be answered from the tapes, then we're going to put a lot more stock in and do some specifics that are going to allow them to excel and have a very great showing at the combine. But as we saw this year with Evan Neal, they tried to bully Evan Neal media-wise and team-wise because he didn't do the combine. He didn't do anything at the combine. And my whole philosophy was, dude, you've played in the national championship for 2 out of the last 3 years. You've got tape starting at left guard, right tackle, and left tackle. There's nothing at the combine that they need to see that they can't see in 41 starts or whatever you had.
Right.
So it's just being aware that, hey, listen, we need to get you better. We got this as we identified as areas for improvement. Now let's get you to understand what you're really good at, what really makes you unique, and let's plug that into the areas for improvement. But it's not just a 4 or 5 week fix. That's a 8 to 10 week window where we can utilize that to really gain ground on building out your skill set. All while getting in terrific shape, all while preparing you for the interview process, all while preparing you emotionally and mentally for what it's going to be like when you get to Indianapolis and making that transition into a building. It's a very structured program. We're in the building very early, 6 a.m. in the morning here. And your whole day is structured much like it would be for training camp. So when these guys get into the building, they've already seen the same song and dance because we did it for 8 to 10 weeks. And then the really good guys that you're starting to see, Rashawn Slater, Trey Smith, and all those guys, as soon as the combine is over, they get their butts right back here to Dallas, and we train all the way up. And I've seen a great trend in guys that have come out and performed their rookie year. That's kind of been the secret sauce. It's not just the 8 to 10 weeks. It's the 8 to 10 weeks, and then they tell their agent, hey, listen, you're paying for the rest of my training going into my rookie year because I don't care about the draft. I don't care about the combine. I'm trying to be dominant. And so that's what you see with those guys. That's why they've come out and performed so well. They trust their process. They trust my process. They trust that they're getting the best of the best from December all the way until they report in August. And that's really what it's been.
And it's truncated that transition time, like you're hinting at there. I mean, what Jeff and I were talking about last time is what you're seeing with these rookies is they're coming in and they're able to play right away, right? Yeah. Where this really was not, this isn't always the case. I mean, you used to have a guy who you could plug in right away as a rookie and he could play at that level. And that guy was, that was an outlier. Everybody else needed to sort of transit. I remember DeBrickashaw Ferguson being one guy where, he was young when I first got in, and they were telling stories about how he really needed to get used to the game and all. I mean, you have these young guys who end up being perennial Pro Bowlers, but they need to transition in. It seems like the way you've approached it, Duke, has truncated that transition time where now those guys get in and it's not a matter of, okay, now we need to learn how to play football again. It's like, no, we're ready to go. We're ready to rock. And now you have these young guys making the Pro Bowl the first year because they're playing, they're playing at a football level. They don't have to worry about unlearning everything they did for the combine stuff and relearning football stuff. So again, hats off.
It's become a progression. It's become a comprehensive progression from when they first step in the building, whenever that is, all the way until the training camp. It's a rev up, and it's periodization, ascending the correct way. But another big factor that plays into that as well is, like, yes, that 10 weeks, but then also when we're able to integrate them back in with the vets. So when they come back from the combine, that the end of February and early March is when the vets start showing up to train. And so that's where the biggest ground is made up, because now they're being able to pick the brains and get inside the psyche of what these vets are thinking and the vet experience. And there's a lot of collaborative of sharing back and forth. And then you take it a step further, they're able to have that for a few weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, another 6 to 8 weeks. And then they go into rookie minicamp and they go, oh shit, that's exactly what Teron Armstead was talking about, or that's exactly what Trey Smith was talking about when we were at the gym. And then they come back for the summer training and they've matured even a little more at a faster rate because they were already prepared for it. And then you bring them into the summit, O-line Masterminds, and now you've got Hall of Famers, you got NFL legends, you've got college coaches, you got professional coaches, you got PTs, you got doctors, you got everything. Any question that you may need answered is answered in that weekend, darn near. And so when you factor that in, again, it's a rev up and it's a holistic approach where everything that you need to be successful is right here if you just open your eyes and ears and pay attention to it.
If I were a head coach now, listening to what you're saying and knowing about what you do, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I wouldn't even make the offensive line do the off-season stuff like the OT, I would just send it to Duke and have everybody come out for the mini camp, and but for O&D line during those OTAs and stuff, it's just a waste of time. Like, send them down there with Duke, let them work like that. I mean, that's. Jeez.
There's a lot of GMs, and there's a lot of O-line coaches that share that same sentiment. I've got a lot of great relationships with a bunch of GMs and offensive line coaches and even strength coaches that are like, hey, man, when our guys are down there, we're not worried. Like, they can stay there as long as they need to, and that's refreshing. That's refreshing. I've got coaches that come down and observe all the time. I've got even training staffs that come down and observe all the time, and really it's really an open door. Like, come on in, I'll explain as much as possible, but it doesn't take long to kind of figure it out once you get here. It's always an aha moment. It's just it's a well-oiled machine in terms of from our dynamic warm-up to our corrective exercises to our our actual strength work to our skill portion to our conditioning portion. And it's like, oh, okay, I get it now. It's very focused.
Man, the D line got to get something going, man. Jeez, I'm crow. You guys can be taking over. You are taking over. Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, dude, because I know
we actually got more time. My meeting got moved back a little bit, so
okay, perfect. I'm curious about your thoughts on this Chiefs offensive line. You talked about sort of the pipeline from your work and these guys coming into KC and your relationship with Kansas City. ESPN, I believe, ranked them the #1 offensive line in the league. And I know, you obviously had a major role in that. So sort of give me your breakdown. What do you think of this offensive line? And maybe go position by position. I don't mean to throw you on the spot, but just sort of your overall thoughts and then maybe name some guys.
You know what? It's fun, man. It's fun because you've got the same unit essentially intact from last year. And I think once Wiley settled in at right tackle, you don't need him to be a world beater. You don't need Andrew to be a world beater. You need him to be functional. You need him to understand how he wins and understand that he's going to win against 85 to 90% of the league.
Right.
He may have some issues with some of those top elite guys. That's kind of what you give up from going from Mitch to Andrew, but that's okay. There's plenty of solid, capable starters in the NFL just like that. Fans may not think so. Fans want everybody to be all Pro Bowl type guy, and it's not realistic.
No.
But when you look at Andrew Wiley, I think having him settled in, there's going to probably be a little competition there eventually from Darian Kennard, which is great. I think Darian has shown some stuff in the preseason. Still has to continue to clean up his hands and set, which was really what we focused on with his time with me, and then just kind of what we identified even on his Kentucky tape. But improvement. I think Andy Heck is going to be the best person for him in that regard. Trey Smith is going to be Trey Smith. He's going to go out there. He's going to bust you in the mouth. He's going to be physical. He's going to be aggressive. He's going to have a bunch of wild plays while all giving you really solid football. Same thing with Creed, who you arguably make the argument that he's one of the top centers in the league already heading into year 2. JT at left guard is, about as consistent and savvy as they come. I don't think we talk about him enough as a top and elite guard in this league, but he is. Like, Honey is just, like, Joe is a really, really good football player and has been for a long time, even when he was with the Patriots. I think that if you really want to know what he's all about, go look at the game that he played when he had a cast on his hand. There's something about being hurt and figuring out things, being able to problem solve, being able to self-organize, and he was able to do that and find a way to win. So that's really a sign of a really elite thinker and elite type of player. Orlando Brown is going to be steady Eddie. He's going to struggle a little bit with speed. That's okay. As long as he is able to take a good set and be in position to recover, Orlando's going to be fine. I think where Orlando runs into issues is where his set is off just a touch and he's not in that position to recover. That's where he ends up running into trouble, shortening the edge. But I think you're going to see them, and I think him probably maybe run the football a little more this year. But, you got number 15 back there. So if you keep number 15 clean and he's able to get down the deep balls out that sideline, those crossing routes, the screen game is deadly when Coach Reed is hitting on all cylinders. And if you add a little power football into that, like they did some games last year, I'm really excited about this O-line.
Yeah. I like what you said about Wiley, and you'd sent out a tweet, and I was laughing, and I responded to the tweet where you basically said what you said. Like, listen, not everybody's going to be a world beater. I mean, not everybody's going to be a perennial Pro Bowler. You got to have some guys that are just limited, but they're consistent. They go in there and consistent. And I tweeted, I'm like, you just summed up my 9-year career in one tweet. I mean, that's how. But I think sometimes because Kansas City has had so many all-stars across the board, I think sometimes we can lose sight of that everybody can't be the future Hall of Famer. But when you have a guy like Wiley who's consistent, who is going to go out there and, like you said, 85-90% of the time going to win, you have 4 Pro Bowlers lined up next to him. I mean, that's a good solid lineup, So
Dallas fans are the worst for that. I mean, they want everybody to be Travis Frederick. They want everybody to be Zach Martin and Tyron Smith.
Right.
And if you're not, you suck.
Yeah. Duke.
Oh, he's not very good. Like, well, why do you say that?
And let me tell you something, Duke. Dallas is the first team I think about. Now, this was a totally different offensive line, but I played them when I was the Jets way back, where they had Leonard Davis and what's this center's name? Andre Gerard. They had Flozell Adams, Colombo. I mean, they had all-stars. And but there were times that they didn't play well. You had all these individual guys that were good, but because they couldn't figure it out as a group, you could take advantage of it. And so, like, that Dallas, I feel like, is the number one culprit, not just on the offensive line, but across the board, of having perennial Pro Bowl talent all over the place and yet never making it to the wild card game. I mean, it's like, I laugh when you say that, because they're the first counterexample that I bring up where it's like, no, look, these guys have all this talented stuff. And that, I guess that brings me to a question is, talk to me about the importance of the cohesiveness of the offensive line, right? Because like I said, you could have, I've played against offensive lines that have 5 Pro Bowlers across the board, and I wasn't worried one bit. But I played against an offensive line like Buffalo Bills back in the day, who had played all the same 5 consistent guys across the board. They were hell to play against because they work together so well. So can you maybe talk to that a little bit as well?
So we've gotten into this thing now where with social media, with a lot of people having a lot of opinions about offensive line that don't have a fucking clue about how to even tape a glove correctly or how to put on a donjoy, are now having an opinion about everything.
Right.
And it's simple as when I make a comment about, like, I don't understand when teams rotate tackles or rotate. It's mind blowing.
Yeah.
Like the continuity that is needed on the offensive line, 5 sets of eyes, 10 eyes saying the same thing, working towards a common goal. Offensive line is the ultimate team within the team. Right. And that continuity of playing together, the same 5 guys together, barring injury, just the communication aspect. And a lot of times it's not even words that need to be said, but it's just it's a look or a grunt or something like that.
Right.
You kind of know what the guy next to you is talking about. And when there's a revolving door in a lineup, you don't get that. You don't understand that, like, if I'm playing guard and this tackle, certain tackles are going to want, that guard to be a little heavier on the B block versus the others.
Mm-hmm.
And, you only know that by that communication and talking over it, hey, how thick do you want me to be on this B block?
Right.
Just give me a little, or no, open him up. Let's lift his shoulder and, like, let's treat it like a deuce, or let's get vertical push, or let's collapse it. So it's small stuff like that the continuity is so important. And it doesn't pay the dividends early on in the season. It pays the dividend in week 7,
right,
week 8, week 9, week 10. Like, that's where, like, that continuity from training camp and those first 6 to 7 weeks are so important for the back end of the season. And if you don't have that, that's when you start to see teams sputter just a little bit.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Just the importance of that, and the lack of communication from the sense of verbally. When you have that continuity, is so important, because there were times I played next to Eric Fisher for a few years, and Mitch Morris. There were times where we absolutely had to say nothing. We could just look at each other and know exactly what to do, and that's just because we played together for a few years. And that transitions to my next question. You talked about coaches rotating guys, and not only rotating guys, but playing them out of position. I kind of articulated it last week with you, and we talked about me being able to play multiple positions. I played guard, I played tackle, left and right, and I was able to do it, but that shit isn't easy. No. And you biomechanically, you can articulate it way better than I can. How hard is that, and why is it not as simple as maybe Twitter makes it seem, or coaches sometimes?
Well, there's certain guys that can absolutely do it flawlessly, seamlessly, and you don't really notice the hiccup. But what ends up happening, especially guys that not so much move from tackle to guard, but sides of the line, is you end up having a shortening response. And what ends up happening is, say I'm a right side player my entire career. Say I'm 14 years in. I've been playing on the right side for 14 years. That means that my hip is in constant flexion. My left hip is in constant flexion. That hip flexor, that psoas, instead of being here, is now done this. And then my right leg is always externally rotated because, I'm on that instep, that hip is always open. So when you look at what that does in terms of things like the glute and the hip flexor and the quad and then the abductor and adductor on that side of fully being externally rotated. And then when you look at what it does to impact the psoas and the hip flexor on the left side, that's always in flexion. And then say, mind you, I've been in this stance for 14 years now. Now in year 15, they want me to play on the left side all of a sudden, and they want me to play guard because they feel like that maybe I've lost a step at right tackle, and now, they have a need at guard. They think I could still play, but, maybe I upgrade guard. All of a sudden now that hip that has been fully externally rotated for the past 14 years, on the right side is now in constant flexion. So
Mm.
now I'm doing this, and my hips are rotated, my core, my hip flexor, and all that type of stuff is just not where it needs to be. I really haven't trained properly on both sides in terms of getting back to symmetry. I've got asymmetry and imbalances now. I go to take a set, and that repetitive motion, that muscle pattern, and that muscle movement ingrained on the right side, it now feels completely wonky on the left side. And now I'm starting to compensate. My body is starting to say, oh, shoot, I'm not used to this, So now I'm taking an extra gather step. Now I'm elongating a little more. And now all of a sudden I've got to pull the hip flexor. Oh, shit, now I got a growing injury. Now my hip is off a little bit. Now I got knee pain in the knee because the joint angles start to change. And then, just in terms of anatomically how I'm starting to structure and what I've ingrained on the opposite side is now kind of being reversed out without any really proper training. So that's kind of an extreme case, but I like to talk extreme cases for people to see the big picture in terms of what it does biomechanically, but just in terms of the actual skill set and the actual feel for it is oftentimes once you move to the opposite side of the line, especially in a new position, your body naturally wants to feel comfortable. So you're going to try to move in a manner in which you feel just as comfortable on your dominant side, whether that was on your right and left. Oftentimes, that comfort zone in terms of which you move with isn't as efficient and will leave you short, especially in the pass set. And so your set points and your landmarks start to change because you thought you were feeling comfortable. In reality, it's not really where it needs to be. So all of a sudden, you start to see a guy undersetting. And then his compensation for undersetting ends up being oversetting, and then now he can't redirect. And so one of the things that we try to work on a lot down here is I don't care if you've been in the league for 10 or 15 years. I don't care if you only played one position. We train right and left side. Just like we make it a habit of doing that, not so much so for you to be prepared, but just to keep the body in some level of symmetry. And then one of the things I always tell the guys is hard to remind them about this is like, hey, when you go back to your team, especially midway through the season, start getting in the opposite side stance and taking sets on the opposite side to kind of unpack all that in layman's terms without getting too scientific and talking over people's head. But some guys go, oh, yeah, I feel much better after a couple of weeks of doing that. It's just lengthening everything back out, get everything back into, balance and, some type of form of symmetry. Go a long ways in keeping guys healthy and then also being able to make the transition to maybe a different position. But flopping sides is very difficult. And then you factor in a young guy that's had to change positions a lot. Alex Leatherwood comes to mind. Alex Leatherwood, career left tackle, all of a sudden moves to right tackle, all of a sudden moves to left guard, then the right guard, now he's back at right tackle. For a guy like that, he's very cerebral. A guy like that, like you want him to be in one position, to come up with a system and a process that works for him, and then own that. I was just telling somebody this the other day. In the NFL, what I've seen is you got guys that are naturally gifted that just go out there and do what they do. And then you got guys that are very process and systematic driven, in which they find what works for them and they stick to that. They may add in a few new things. And then you got guys that are the ultimate like on the fly compensators and problem solvers where they just figure shit out, where they can just get the job done. It may look different every single time, but they get it done. And then you got the elite guys that really have all three of those traits, where they understand who they are and can do some special stuff and just be who they are, but they also have a process within that, and then they're able to problem solve on the fly. Those are typically the elite guys. Not everybody could be that. So understanding what type of guy you are, whether you're a God-given guy that's going to stick with that athleticism and get them out of trouble, or whether you're a process-driven guy, or whether you're a problem-solve type of guy, it goes a long ways in understanding how you're going to learn. And even for coaches, like I've had to learn that. I've had to learn what type of guy I'm coaching in order for him to get the most out of what I'm doing. That way I can speak his language. Because if I'm throwing a bunch of stuff out of a process guy and it's not within their language, they're going to shut down and not be able to retain that. So like with Leatherwood's a process guy. He's a guy that likes structure. He's a guy that's going to need to hear the same stuff over and over again. Not telling him the same stuff, but the cueing. Like you got to make sure you cue him the same way over and over again, and then he'll get it. But if you're throwing a bunch at some of those guys, flipping sides and then changing certain stuff, or hey, giving general, hey, throw your hands here. I hear a lot of coaches that give cues that just aren't impactful, that really aren't telling a guy what to do or how to do it. It's something, I think that, and I'm not saying that this is what's going on with Alex, but this is just my observation. That I know what type of guy he is. Yeah. So he needs reps in a system that's going to allow him to continue to develop at that right tackle position.
Yeah, man, he hit that. We had these conversations all the time, but I never heard that from you. And that's so true, man. Like, I wasn't an elite guy. I probably had 2 of those traits, but I never had all 3 of them. But when I first got in the league, I was a tackle my entire career in college. We played right side, left side, strong side, weak side in college. So I was able to play right and left because of that, but I was a tackle. And it's totally different from guard. I got through in the fire my rookie year as a guard, and I absolutely sucked because it's a totally different battle. And I didn't have great coaching, but I didn't know it. I didn't know it at the time. But as I got older and I got around some great coaches, I'm like, holy shit! Like I was just hung out to dry. And a lot of guys, it's detrimental mentally and physically because sometimes guys can't come back from that. Some guys aren't lucky like me where they clean house and then they bring in an excellent staff and a great O-line coach like Andy Heck that can build you back up. But that goes on a lot in the league. And I know you don't know what's going on with Leatherwood, but you're smart enough to see with your own eyes and make that assumption.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just kind of what I see. And I see it around the league. One of the things that I always try to, when I have conversations with front offices and even coaches, one thing that I always tell them is like, hey, us as coaches, we got to understand what really makes these guys unique and special. And once we can identify that'll go a long ways for us to be able to plug in areas for improvement. Because yes, we want guys that are able to learn new things, but in order to replicate those things, there has to be a level of familiarity. And if we want a guy to be able to replicate something we're asking them, then we have to find a way where we're able to plug in something that he's really good at to get that job done. That way we know even doing tough competition, guys are always going to revert back to their lowest level of training. Yeah. If their lowest level of training happens to fall in their wheelhouse, then they're able to replicate that. If their lowest level of training is something that they've learned that they didn't fully trust in the first place, they're going to abandon it and try to go back to whatever hell they feel safe and comfortable at. So I always try to tell coaches like, hey, let's find and identify what makes these guys unique and special and plug that into the rest of their game. And then also, let's not coach away what makes these guys unique and special. We as coaches fall into this trap of always wanting things done our way. And sometimes when that happens, we coach away what makes these guys who they are. And we got to really be self-aware as coaches and developers when that ends up being the case. When hey, we want it this way. We need to ask ourselves, why do we want it that way? And if we want it that way, is this putting this kid in the best situation to be able to replicate and have success down in, down out? If the answer is no, then we need to look in the mirror. Because the first thing that coaches always say, oh, this fucking guy can't do it. Give me somebody else.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's not always the case. If you got a first round guy there that your front office and, through months and months of preparation and, investigation and scouting, feel like that this is the guy, and you're saying this is the guy because he can do X, Y, Z. Let him do X, Y, Z.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Man, we could go all day, man.
Yeah, Big Duke. Make sure everyone, Chiefs Kingdom, follow him at Big Duke 50 on Twitter. Duke, this has been incredible. You have to come back on during the season. There's going to be so much more to talk about. Thank you so much for your time today. It really has been an honor, Duke. We appreciate it so much. Big Jeff, great to see you, brother. Love you, bro.
Good to see y'all, man. Appreciate you coming on, Duke.
Chiefs Kingdom, we will. Oh, go
I
ahead.
got to send you some Mastermind IPA.
Oh yeah. Shout out Mastermind IPA. Man, Duke is not only the greatest O-line guru in the game right now, he got the greatest beer too.
Oh, we gotta
It's
get it.
pretty
So
good.
listen, the next time you come on, Duke, we'll all share a beer together.
Hey, and we can order that online too. So make sure you mention that right now.
Yes.
Yeah,
In fact, go
absolutely.
ahead.
Hit up Hop and Sting Brewery. Hop and Sting will be able to take care of you guys. But if you're in the DFW area, we are probably in about 30 or 40 bars already.
Nice.
We're in multiple stores with the cans. So you can buy cans at various bars and in stores, liquor stores around here. We're going to be in DFW Airport any day on a couple of taps. We'll be at Texas Live. We'll eventually be coming to Albertsons and some other places pretty soon, but it's a 7.7% IPA, traditional hazy IPA, not too hoppy, just enough hops, beautiful citrus notes, and it's made in the true essence of what O-line play is about. It's gritty, it's bold, it's in your face, but smooth when it needs to be.
It is, man. It's really good. And I'm not a beer guy, and it's amazing. I can tell you that.
Well, listen, when I tweet out the episode, I will make sure to tag you and to tag the website as well, okay? But yeah, next time you come on, Duke, we'll share a beer together. I'm excited to try it. Thank you again, brother.
Sounds
so
good.
grateful. Chiefs Kingdom, we'll see you next week on One-on-One. Talk more Chiefs football.